With our feet firmly on the ground on the big island of Hawaii, we head to the rental car place to get us a car. And what our plans are is to camp in the county campgrounds. We brought all of our backpack stuff in one big suitcase. We set up our tent, and we learned that there's a $20 fee per person to camp at a campsite. So we have to pay $40 for the two of us to stay one night. I think the county of Hawaii has eliminated us as being future customers to the island. I don't know how they expect to get away with that, but one thing, only very few people camp in the campgrounds. Most of them are for hotels, so we're not going back. They have eliminated the exact thing we come for. But anyway, we're here, and so we're going to go out where the mango tree is and see if we can pick up some mangoes off the ground. Usually they're ripe about this time of year, so we did find some, but they were a little later about ripening this year. A little mongoose makes good his getaway right in front of us. There are coconut trees with coconuts on them that are ready to eat. The only problem is getting them down from those tall trees. There's a very important historical site right next to the campground. It was one of the last built by the indigenous peoples on the island of Hawaii. We even see one of the shaggy Maine mushrooms poking its way up through the gravel. After spending our first night at Wainema, we decide to go to the other side of the island and go through the town of Wainema and check their cowboy boot out. And every place you look on the big island, you see these pharaoh chickens running all over the place. I'll bet if you had a place there and put up a nesting box, you wouldn't even have to buy chickens. They would come. Just before we get in to Hilo, we see a waterfall, so we're going up and check it out. Just a short drive through the rural countryside, we end up at this really nice waterfall. We'll take a few pictures and then be on our way. We stop at a fruit stand. Marge has a terrible hunger for some bananas, and how about that? Some bananas growing right on the bush. Then we check out their taro and other things they're growing. They call this a farm. I imagine it's about a half acre, but they sure grow a lot of good food on it, including pineapple and more bananas hanging on their stalk.
Sam, did you grow them here?
Those are grown all on the property here, yeah.
Oh, and do you cut the tree down to harvest them?
The entire tree comes down. If there's one stalk of bananas on there, the entire thing, we just take a machete and chop it right down, yeah.
Chop it right down, yeah. That's one that is ripe.
This is a ripe papaya, yeah.
Okay.
And just pluck it right off.
I'll be darned.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Then I finally see what we're here for on the big island of Hawaii. We're here to have a Walmart vacation. Marge insisted to go in. Now we're working on beating the county of Hawaii at their own game. We found a free place to camp over in Volcanic National Park, and it was so quiet and so nice. We even had some of the little pheasants. They're indigenous to Hawaii, and they're endangered and only found on the big island of Hawaii. But we saw plenty of them in the Volcanic National Park, but we saw none anyplace else. Even some little babies. stand alongside the road watching. Mama and Daddy are nearby. You usually always see these in couples with a rooster and a hen. They're very fancy birds, particularly the rooster, and they just love to run up alongside the road. And along the road we see all sorts of very colorful flowers with a little morning dew still on them. We found Volcanic National Park an extremely pretty place to camp and an excellent spot to do some exploring. They have different growth zones, with each of them with its own individual type of pretty flowers growing. As we go along in the early morning light, I look ahead, and here are two of the feral pigs. And these pigs, some of them were brought by the first Polynesians to come here, and others, of course, were brought here and either were released or got away, and they make a good living for themselves, as these two little hogs were doing. They just seem to entertain themselves by doing a lot of rooting and a little bit of grunting out through the Volcanic National Park, and they've got hundreds of acres to roam on, where they can go to the place where they find the best things to eat. With all the farrow chickens that were around, it looks like bacon and eggs would be the thing to have for breakfast, but we didn't find any of the eggs, and I'm afraid that bacon would have been a little too fresh to eat, and besides, those were good pigs. They must have really toughened that nose up where they don't cut it all up on all this volcanic rock. The whole place is volcanic rock here with just a little bit of soil on it, and that must be pretty darn tough to root in, so they must have really tough snouts. Marge was wondering how she could get close enough to get a good picture with her camera, and I told her just to walk out there and do it. So she walked out fairly close to them, and then she decided she wanted to get their faces, and so she decided to call them. And she says, "Here, pig, pig, pig," and boy, did they take to hoof. There are a lot of these feral pigs on the island, but they're really smart, and it's rare that you ever see one. So we were extremely lucky to run on these two little guys. Then we drove to the end of the road, and there's a trail for about 2.5 miles that you can hike down to the beach, but it looks like it's going to be a nice day, so why don't we just drive to the beach this morning? The volcanic lava has flowed out in all sorts of different shapes. Every place you look, you see volcanic lava. Some of it even looks like coiled ropes. And then there are volcanoes. Every place you look, there's a volcano. And there's usually a date on it estimating the time that erupted. So in all sorts of various different times, these volcanoes have erupted. And most of them are still steaming somewhat, and particularly early of a morning. This one's putting out a good cloud of steam. We drive down out of Volcanic National Park, down near the beach, where there are all sorts of trees. It's almost like you're going through a tunnel on some of these roads. And the roads are quite narrow, and a lot of times you can only go 35 miles an hour. The weather's nice and warm, and the ocean's roaring as I take this picture of Marge right through some of the stabilizer roots of some of the trees. Tonight we decide not to go back to Volcanic National Park. we're staying at a private campground called Arnauts Lodge, and it's just like somebody's backyard where you pitch your tent, but it was only half the price of the county campgrounds, so that was okay. Then the next morning, we head down to the beach. We're going to a very remote little beach where the waves are crashing against the shoreline. From the beach, we head to a hot spring. This is a hot pond where salt water flows down and gets heated by the volcano and then comes up in a great huge pond called the hot pond. When we arrive at the hot pond, we find there's already several tourists there, but that's okay. We didn't expect to have it all to ourselves anyway. And so you can paddle around in here or snorkel. And there are little fish that come up and nibble on you, taking the dead skin off your body. There's a variety of tiny tropical fish come in and swarm all around you when you're in these hot tubs. They like to chew the dead skin off your toes, and some of them just tickle a little bit, and others actually bite hard enough it hurts a little bit. Since this pool is affected by the tide, and the salt water comes and goes with the tide, and these little fish come in and out with the tide as well. There's a rope across where the tide comes in and out to keep you from being swept out to sea through this narrow slot opening. On the incoming tide, there's always many more fish than there is on the outgoing. I guess because on the outgoing the water that's flowing out's a little too warm for them, and they go out to sea to wait till it comes in, and then it cools off just a little bit. There are numerous different species of these fish come in and dart around in the pool. I've decided that there's only one good thing to do, and that's to make some little colorful sardines out of these little fish. But it's just like the rabbit stew. First, you have to catch the fish. So I have a plan. What I'm going to do is have Marge come in and sit still, and then when they all crowd around her, I'll just reach out there and grab a handful or two once in a while. But like some things, not everything works, and it seems like those fish are just a little bit too fast to catch. So I'm going to have to figure out something else, or else give up on the idea of sardines. After a few tries at this and not catching one, I finally decided that I can't make sardines anyway. I forgot to bring a sardine can down. So maybe next time, if I can remember to bring a sardine can, I can figure out how to catch these little guys. My bait is complaining. She claims that those little fish are hurting when they bite her. So I'm going to have to give up on this idea. I've already given up on bacon and eggs, and so now I guess I'm going to have to give up on having sardines too. Out of I don't know how many tries, I never even as much as touched one of the little guys. It's not that there wasn't plenty of them around, it's just they're making them too fast anymore. And I had really good bait. They're just swarming all over, but still not a single fish. It's a lot of work trying to make sardines, and by now we're totally exhausted, so we decided to take to the vehicle and go down the narrow little corridor where the road runs and go back to our camp. We decided to spend a second night at this private campground, and it was mostly set up for bicycles and stuff, and you camped out back, in a place where there was only just like a small backyard everyone camped in, and there was men's and women's bathroom was shared, and then there was a kitchen for men and a kitchen for women. And I don't know what the deal is on that. You can share the bathroom, but you can't the kitchen. So we went to the beach the next day and spent the entire day down on the beach and looking at pretty flowers. And then by evening we decided to go back to our very favorite free campground at Volcano National Park. One of their little grouse hens is sure sneaking around. I set up the camp in a very nice campsite. We even brought an air mattress with us, so we'll be really comfortable at night. We had a super nice quiet night, although this campground, the literature we read on it said it rarely ever fills. But at that time they didn't know about what the stunt the county parks were going to pull on people, so it was full most every night. The entire area is on an old lava flow, so everything sort of looks alike out when you get out and walking around. At first light of a morning, Marge went out to go for a little hike from our campground. She didn't even take time to dress. She was just wearing her nightgown and walked out just to take a couple pictures and then returned to camp. But she got out there and everything looked alike, and she lost her way and became lost. Fortunately, one of the guys in the search and rescue was there, but she managed to find her way back in about 2 hours without water. Then we took off to head for the beach, and another one of the special Hawaiian birds is out strutting around taking good care of his hen. The next day on the way to the beach, we found a farmer's market, and they even have fish in a aquarium there, and you can buy a fish that you'd like.
Where do they
cook
come
and
from?
These are actually farmed down in Honeyham.
Pardon?
These are actually farmed down in Hilltown.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
What are they called?
tilapia.
Tilapia, huh?
Yeah, some people grow tomatoes, I grow tilapia, catfish, and
Yeah.
The atmosphere is just like a fair, and you can buy anything you want or need, and even a few things you don't need at this place. They have a lot of handmade jewelry and all kinds of fruit and vegetables and just anything you'd need for the table. And so these people do this twice a week, and there was so many people there. It looked like it was everyone on the island has showed up, and there are orchids of every kind and color that these people have grown right here on the island. The orchids grow extremely well on the island, but we have tried them at home, and they don't do so well for us at home. We'll buy a few oranges and a little bit of fruit, and that'll probably be all we need from this market. And of course Marge will probably buy a little bit of their jewelry from the people that make it.
Almost. Yeah, it's like grapefruit.
citrus, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's sweeter than...
Sweeter than these. So we should try. How much?
$3.
3 for this?
No, I have $1.
1? Let's do 1 for my.
All of the problems.
How did they make this?
I blew all the glass here myself. Yep, I've been blowing glass over 25 years.
We got Samoan, we got some French crepe. Where do you have all that?
After our trip to the farmer's market, we decide to return to the Volcanic National Park, and there's a place here that we have to see. It's the volcano that's very active, and during the daytime all you see is some gray steam coming up from the volcano, but wait till after dark. You really get a pleasant surprise. By now it's puffing plenty of steam.
It's a short 20-minute geology talk about Kilauea pretty much, and I go over all the cool eruptions that happen here and the current eruption update, so yeah, they're around if you're interested. If not, I'm just going to start talking. So, before I get too in-depth with Kilauea, some background information on myself. My name is Ranger Rebecca. I was born and raised right here on the Big Island. In fact, I was born in Hilo, and then when I was about 5 years old, my parents decided they wanted to live in the boonies, and so they moved us up here. I lived about 4 miles away from the national park. I came here a lot. My dad does a bunch of education outreach for CSAVE, the Center of the Study of Active Volcanoes, which is a program that's part of the University of Hilo. And so his main job is to go around to the 4th and 5th graders and talk about natural hazards, so earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, all that jazz. So I'm prepped for the rest of my life, to do in any natural hazard. He's pretty much engraved into us since we were really young. What was really awesome about his job is during the summertime we got international volcanologists who did a program through CSAVE, and depending on what they were doing, I was tagging along on their field work, and so I was out here playing on the lava fields and the rainforest. This is my playground, and now I get to work in it. I did just eruptions going on at the very same time, so the one right behind us, and there's one about 12 miles down here. And everyone comes here, and the first thing they talk about, they're wondering where the volcanoes is. They remember years and years ago where they did this and they did that. And so I always call Kilauea the ever-changing volcano because it's never the same. Every time you come here, something new is happening. And so we're going to go back in time about 500 years ago where this volcano was actually 500 feet taller than this. And it had more of a shield-like shape. So I don't know, if you guys look out there, you can kind of sort of see the peak of Mauna Loa up on the top there. So it had that nice little shield shape. And what happened was the magma reservoir dropped. So there's nothing holding up the walls of the volcano, and it went made that exact same noise. Everything collapsed. It actually dropped 2,000 feet deep. What we're standing today is 425 feet deep. So it's been pretty busy. It's been refilling with lava flows. Even this crater that we see right here, this is Halimo'omo crater. In the 1800s, it was actually a perched lava lake. So it looks something like this. Sort of like an above-ground swimming pool with hot molten lava coming out of it. And it made Kilauea really, really, really famous. Everybody wanted to see this lava lake. Back then, everyone took a boat here. They reported at Hilo, and then they took a train, but the train only went halfway up. So then they had to strap on their hiking boots and hike all the way up to the summit. And the only place to stay here on the volcano was Volcano House, which is kind of right across the caldera here. And Volcano House got really, really nervous about all these people.
As darkness slowly came down on us, we could look and see this starting to glow. What it is that steam. All the molding lava down below reflects on the steam, and so it gives you a really pretty glow as it gets darker and darker. As darkness set in on us, more and more people from throughout the world showed up. We talked to several of them, and there was a couple on each side of us that were from New York City, and not just New York State, New York City. They lived downtown in apartments and didn't even own a car. Whenever they needed a car, they'd rent it, and otherwise they rode the subway and walked to work. I can't imagine that lifestyle, but I guess they've adapted to it, and they were certainly enjoying seeing the volcano put on her show as it got darker and darker. It's even lighting up the cliffs all around it from the glow of the molding lava. I explained to these people I was raised on a ranch in Montana, and I don't think they understood what my life was, and I certainly didn't understand theirs. After the next morning, we heard about some tree casts. This is where the volcanic lava flowed against some trees, and it made a perfect cast of the tree. So we'll go out and check these tree casts out, and they are really nice. They're the exact shape of the tree. Some of them were bigger trees and others were smaller trees, and then there's new trees starting to grow in the hole where the old one had been burned out. There's a rail around each of the tree casts to keep somebody from falling in. It would be real easy to fall in one of these holes, and they're about like a well. It would hurt if you fell down in that, I'm sure. This tree was leaning a little sideways when it grew, and then a new tree has started growing in the same hole. Now it's time to go down to the beach. So we're going to go down to the Black Sands beach where the giant sea turtles come in and rest on the shore. We go to the bathroom and head down to the beach to see if we can see some sea turtles. And we didn't have to look long, and we could see some working in the surf. There's one old guy sticking his head up to look around. They're feeding on algae actually in the edge of the surf. The sand is certainly nice and black here, and even there's a lily pond with some really pretty lilies blooming. But that's not what I'm walking over here for. I'd heard rumor that some Viking explorers had landed on this island prehistorically, and that they'd actually left ruin writings, and someone told me where they thought they were, so I have to go explore. I didn't really expect to find them, but wow, that was fascinating, and I needed to give it a try. I walked clear across where the turtles live in this little bay, and then up on a hill on the other side. When I get up here, I find a walking trail, and this trail was built by the early Polynesians in prehistoric times, and they had carried smooth, wave-worn rocks up on the hill and paved the trail. But that trail is more for barefoot walking, like they would have done. Marge and I found it almost easier to walk alongside the trail. But wow, what an interesting, exciting sight this was to see it. So we walked about 1.5 miles along this trail looking for any sign of petroglyphs or ruin writing, but we never found a thing. But it was a nice hot day, and we're sure going through the water, so we turned around and went back to see if we could find the giant sea turtles. And by now they're starting to make their way up on the beach to lay there and sleep for a while. And the tourists from all over come to this spot to watch these giant sea turtles take their naps.